I don't know if this expression, slum architecture, is employed by many people, but I felt like this subject is at least potentially very important for our time, because we do have slums. There are many. I learned that about 1 billion people live in slums in today's world, and to say nothing about this is simply unjust. Unfortunately, I cannot move forward. Okay. It could be, a lot of architecture that is could be described as slum architecture is what could be called ad hoc architecture. In a way, an unplanned architecture. And I know that for architects, this is very difficult to imagine an unplanned architecture. But if 1 billion people on this earth live in an unplanned, let's call it architecture, then maybe we should reflect on this. The idea of this presentation came from Desin, where I discovered an article about some pictures taken by this photographer, Cristobal Palma, of the ill-famed Buenos Aires slum before redevelopment. So apparently a famous slum in Buenos Aires, in Argentina, of course, and the photographer wanted to record what was, maybe still is, before an ambitious redevelopment plan. You see the majestic highway, and then you see buildings on both sides of the highway. And now you are going to see pictures of this slum that came into being in an alarming proximity to the highway. As works began to transform the notorious Villa 31 slum into an official Buenos Aires barrio, Chilean photographer Cristobal Palma documented its distinct architecture. Villa 31 is the most well-known Villa Miseria in the Argentinian capital, home to more than 40,000 people, including both Argentinian nationals and immigrants from neighboring countries. Villa Miseria. I even thought somehow to oppose to Villa Savoie, one of these buildings from which could be called Villa Miseria. And look at Villa Miseria. I mean, one of the Villas Miseria, which was built under the highway. And yes, it's a work in progress. It's unfinished. But in my opinion, there are virtues in this unplanned architecture, or partially planned. It contradicts the system. It is in a way a token of freedom that we are witnessing here. We witness a deviant architecture, and I think what attracted me to the subject slum architecture is exactly this aspect, that it is a deviant architecture. Palma started visiting in 2019 when work was already underway to integrate the neighborhood into the infrastructure of the city with sewage systems, running water, and connection to the power grid. His photographs reveal the ad hoc buildings and dense streetscapes that define this unplanned part of the city, which is in the center of Buenos Aires. And this is also something rather unique, because usually slums are built, on the fringe, at the periphery of the city. But here we have this unexpected situation where these accidental buildings were built very close to the city center. And, there is something attractive for me personally. There is something attractive in this deviant architecture, which serves the poor, you know, which serves actually life at its most basic level. Yes, there are problems. We are going to see a lot of images of slums from other parts of the world, Africa or India, where indeed the level of lack of basic, services is alarming. But here in Buenos Aires, I guess we still have walls built of brick. We have clothing brought out in order to dry, something that is seen even in more so-called, accomplished urban contexts, like in Italy or Spain or who knows where. Villa 31, I don't know why it was called Villa 31, has a definitive border bounded by a highway on one side and a railway line and station on the other. This fueled its isolation despite a location close to the city center and adjacent to the affluent Recoleta neighborhood. Since the 1930s, it had developed without any centralized planning or regulation. And again, this in the center of a major capital. Buenos Aires is a major city. And not all buildings, perhaps arrive at an explicit slum status, but as a result, there is resident-built homes were built along narrow, unpaved streets. Cables hung overhead, illegally drawing electricity from nearby power lines, while rain caused the streets to fill up with polluted water. Some of the structures felt very precarious, Palma said. It felt like they were about to collapse. But it was also a kind of paradigm of what a city could be if there were no cars, he added. The way people interacted with public spaces felt, in a way, very sophisticated. And the building I consider even aesthetically rather enticing, this kind of a spontaneous ad hoc architecture does have its virtues. It escapes, the predictable paradigms. It escapes expectations. And even this building that we look at, it does have a certain richness of expression, if I am allowed to say so. And in 2016, the city government started drawing up plans to redevelop Villa 31 and improve conditions for its residents. The project was not welcomed by all. Media coverage revealed that many residents were fearful of the changes, with concerns they would be forced to leave their homes without any eventual benefit. It's very politically charged, said the photographer Palma, because so many different people have tried to do different things there over the years. Even here, you have some kind of a conjunctio oppositorum, the massive highway above and then the fragility of human existence underneath. Not respecting rules and regulations, and somehow you see is some kind of a revenge of life at its most basic level against excessive centralization and authority and power. I like this aspect, the deviant aspect of slums. And the scheme funded by the city government, the World Bank, and the Inter-American Development Bank has already transformed the newly renamed Barrio 31, with more changes still to come. As well as paved roads, sewage, and power, the neighborhood now has 3 schools and the bank and is served by buses for the first time. Residents can also get mortgages to buy their homes. I think in the common practice of architecture, there is very little room for spontaneity. And I think this is a problem. Okay, you might say that this is a poor environment, but you know, these people are alive and talking, chatting, and you know, the baby might enjoy the talk of the mothers, and you know, I don't know what to say. It's life, you know. Okay, considering the rules and regulations, probably many things are unacceptable, but life is more complex than the rules and regulations. Buenos Aires, Villa Miseria. Palma felt it was important to create a record of how things were before redevelopment began, offering insight into what life was like for the residents of this neighborhood. In Latin America, these kinds of favelas are usually on the periphery. You don't get to see them unless you go there. But this one was very present, and was very present because it's in the very close to the city center. And he took some pictures also from inside some buildings. As you can see, normal life with its you know, peculiarities and idiosyncrasies does happen everywhere, you know. His photos show buildings rising up around the highway flyover, made from an assortment of different materials, while others show rooftops covered with materials, washing lines, water tanks, and paddling pools. He also captured portraits of some residents within their homes. From the inside, it looked very homogeneous, he said. But once I went in, I noticed all of these different sub-neighborhoods, some more affluent and some more precarious. It was so dramatic with the highway going through, he continued. Some people could actually touch the highway from their bedrooms. Another thing the photographer observed was the lack of nature within the neighborhood besides the occasional tree. It was a big contrast with the rest of the city, he said. And here is one of these occasional trees brought there, you know, by the members of the Villa Miseria. Now I show something else, an experiment in a way in the Netherlands, where this photographer, Ursula Schulz-Dornburg, she revealed the Jankology architecture built by children. Apparently, it was given to children in the 60s, a piece of land where they were allowed to build in complete freedom what they wanted to build and not what the adults wanted them to build. And the reason I included, they are not really slums, but the architecture is not very different from what we saw previously and what we will see after this short presentation on this Jankology, because it's about spontaneity, improvisation, using found materials and so on. And the kids enjoy it very much. A radical playground in the 60s, Amsterdam, is revealed in a series of previously unseen images by German photographer Ursula Schulz-Dornburg. Here she picks out her favorite shots, and you are going to see them. Located on an island that was only accessible by rowing boat, Jongensland was one of several junk playgrounds established after the Second World War. The aim was to foster independent thinking among young boys by giving them a place they could make their own with little or no adult supervision. Schulz-Dornburg's images, now published for the first time in the book Huts, Temples, Castles, show the creativity that resulted from giving children this level of autonomy. The photos captured in 1969 reveal how young boys and girls turned discarded materials into elaborate self-built structures in a practice known as Jankology. And here they are, the builders. And I love this. You know, okay, not everything is perfect, of course, but you see here the children learning to live and learning to build by themselves. You know, life as an adventure, building as an adventure. And I think very often we do not give children what they deserve, enough trust. Because if we give them trust, they are imaginative, they are intelligent, and they are creative. And this is what these photographs attempt to show. This photo gives you a sense that Jongens land was more than just an environment that allowed children to naturally develop their minds. It was also a free space for young boys to wander, experiment, and even wreck without controlled supervision. So they had to learn to take charge of their behavior, the photographer said. At times there could be conflicts and injuries, but it taught the children how to pick themselves up and learn from their actions. Look, they build this, the children, without studying architecture, without probably knowing at first how to use a hammer and nails. And yet they build this thing. You know, very interesting. So it's possible. It's possible if we allow life to assert itself beyond the aforementioned frightening and morose rules and regulations. Seeing the impressive structures that these young children made by hand highlights the striking difference in our culture today, where technology plays a big part, said the photographer. You know, again, it's about the pioneering, the act. It's about allowing the children to discover and experiment and even make mistakes, yes. That ladder that goes up there obviously would not have been easily accepted by Mr. Ernest Neufert, but who cares? On this island in the Netherlands, the children were allowed to experiment. And of course, you know, this I almost said young man, he seems to be a little bit older, the way he, you know, precariously, you know, steps on that bicycle makes one wonder. You know, he could fall at any time, but again and again, it's about living. It's about assuming certain risks and enjoying those risks. And here we see the children, you know, building. Children building, no architect there, no supervisor, no, you know, authority or authoritarian instance. Here we see how the children had to work together to construct their space in Jongens land, she said, the photographer. It is heartwarming to see the form of the structure slowly coming together, with the children bouncing ideas off each other for the next steps in their construction. And here they are, hopefully not endangering the forest or the trees, but excited to build, you know, to move upwards with a few words, so on. Nice. I like this. It's, yeah, addressed to life. The creation of Jongens land brought a universal change towards the understanding that children can achieve anything when given undivided freedom and opportunity to make and create, said the photographer. And now I want to show images from slums all over the world, a number of images. I found this question on Arch Daily: should we call them slums? Yes, they are called slums, but slum is a word which could receive some interpretations. In general, it means, you know, a housing community, usually housing done spontaneously, in a way radically, with poor means, found objects, improvised, an ad hoc architecture, which was built by people without great means, maybe even in despair. But in a strange way, perhaps I will end this presentation with inspired by, well, more than inspired, with the words of environmentalist scientist who claimed that actually these slums could pave the way towards the city of the future. What do we see here? Yes, we see a certain level of disorder, although it is a crystallized disorder. We see the unexpected often. We see things that the books claim shouldn't be built. But again, life is richer, is more complex. I mean, if we look at the slum at the bottom and the, I would say almost monstrous monolith at the top, which one is better? Which one says yes to life more convincingly? Of course, there are problems. We shouldn't romanticize the slums because, yes, many very, very, very poor people live there and the conditions are very, very difficult. But again, you know, if we compare the two realities, the one at the top and the one at the bottom, which one is the first, you know, answer or impulse is closer to truth in a way? Which one says yes to life more convincingly? The mammoth building at the top or the fragmentations and the precariousness at the bottom? These slums actually, I think, could make us think at a time when, you know, we are confronted with climate change, with sustainability problems. It is actually about living more modestly on this earth. But living more modestly is not without problems, of course. A lot of textiles here, as you can see, you know, it's like living, almost returning to that primordial gesture or element in architecture, in construction, which is weaving, which is the textile. But here is literally the textile because people, you know, there are almost no walls, you know, or the walls are made up of textiles, of the clothes that are, you know, hanged in order to be to dry. It's a curious environment, but we cannot say that it's sterile or it's frigid. Far from it. Much more sterile and frigid looks like the monolith on the right or in the background. So it's very interesting, the juxtaposition of these two realities, the simultaneous presence of these two very different ways of, you know, inhabiting in a city today. And there are very big cities in India, in Asia, in South America, which have lots of slums, from Rio de Janeiro to Mumbai to other cities. You know, it's a global phenomenon. But again, I will ask the question between, in my opinion, the glorious, excessively stable and very sure of itself architecture at the top, and the fragility of what is at the bottom, which one pollutes more? Without doubt, the one at the top. The ones at the bottom are not really responsible for the diminishing layer of ozone. Now on Bloomberg.com, I discovered this article. This is a tentative presentation on a large subject, and it doesn't have the pretension to be more than that. But it intrigued me that, you know, some of the world's slums are not mapped. This is very interesting. They are, in a way, you know, they are absent on the maps of the world. Researchers and residents are turning to open source data tools to fill information gaps about informal settlements that often get left off official maps, because official maps don't like unpleasant things, and slums are unpleasant through the raw truth. And I was always interested in islands of unavailability. And in a certain way, these slums are exactly this, you know, hinterlands, islands of unavailability. You know, like this one, I think is in Peru. You know, it doesn't appear on maps, you know, but from a certain point of view, to live in an area of the earth which was not mapped is not a bad thing at all. Why should we map everything? Yes, you could say it's unbearable. How could people live like this? But from an unacceptably romantic point of view, is this elevation of these precarious, poor dwellings stacked one on top of the other, is it less engaging, even visually, than the blank facade of a block of flats? I don't think it is. So we do pay a price for the civilizing forces of life and society, and the excessive concern with so-called civilization, or the mysticism of hygiene, as Friedrich Kissler calls it, made us forget, you know, the ingredients life is composed of. You know, some of them which are completely missing in modern urbanism. But here again, I'm not trying to advocate that we all live like this. No, but maybe we can see also some positive elements here. For example, that this does not pollute a lot. This is built with the found materials, so it's very sustainable from this point of view. Of course, it depends on what climate you are building in, but this is a warm climate, it seems. You know, small piercing openings into the walls. No, those proud, misleading, demagogical, large glass windows that we have, you know, in so many buildings, which also implies a lot of loss of energy. This is in India during the pandemic. Okay, you could say, how could people live like this? Well, you know, I'm not saying that is the most glorious life, but these people probably are more at peace with themselves than an angry office worker who leaves at 5 p.m. his office and finds himself stuck in the traffic for 1 hour and a half or 2 hours. Yeah, again, you know, people like you and me, masked because it's the pandemic, and then what do we see? We see life as lived in that area. In this, I don't know in what place in India, but the images are from India. Okay, you could say these people don't produce anything. They don't contribute to the development of the world and so on and so forth. But they also don't consume so much. So they don't alter the world and the layer of ozone either. The truth is, you can live with very simple means. You know, you see, you can make a roof or the approximation of a roofing with a blanket. You can, okay, you could say it's a lot of disorder here. I can't bear it. But the disorder is also within ourselves. Or maybe I shouldn't talk about other people. I should only talk about me. But am I a monument of order? I am not. If I am to be honest, I am not. So what I see here, it's real life with its problems, with its fragilities, with its fears, but also with its you know, coming to terms in a way with life, even with an illness like coronavirus. So we see in the back the attack almost of progress, so-called progress, and in the foreground we see the spontaneity of a different kind of living in a different kind of housing. Okay, this could be depressing for most people, probably because it denotes poverty and lack of horizons and whatever. But you know, there are people who commit suicides in glorious penthouses, and you know, despair doesn't really need despairing lodgings in order to manifest itself. Rem Koolhaas was quite explicit about it when he said that you know, you could have violence and all kinds of misery in the most luxurious surroundings or villas. So, you know, again, I look at this and I say, wait, could I live like this? Probably not with ease. But maybe this could also be seen like some kind of a post-apocalyptic architecture, you know, where life is reborn from the ashes of some disaster. Life, life moves on. And what I see here is, in a way, what Gaston Bachelard said about the mollusk that lives in order to build its home, as opposed to building its home in order to live in. And like these things grew out of necessity, and they were built by the people living there, and you know, one piece at a time. I'm not saying one room at a time, because I don't think it was so easy to do so. You know, one piece at a time. You can see here things that could make you smile in a bitter way. You know, look at this fragment of a ladder. But you see here, you know, a bird, you know, part of the ambiance, and then you see the clothes, and then you see the children, and then you see some inscription here, and I don't know. It's, again, I don't want to romanticize it, but I don't see it as evil or as you know, something that says no to life. No, I could assume a superior position and say, hey, I have empathy, I have sympathy, I have compassion. No, no. I could easily have more compassion for the sterility of the life many of the people around me, maybe including myself, have, compared to these people who struggle, yes, struggle to survive. And we are going to read at the very end, and we are approaching the end, some remarks about the positive aspects of slums, or what we can learn from them. Now, of course, from several points of view, if not many points of view, this is a way of life which does have, you know, problems with what we call hygiene. But uh, Dr. Freud and his clients did have a lot of means in the field of hygiene, and yet they arrived at laying on his sofa. Why? If everything was fine, if we can purge ourselves by just washing ourselves and making us ourselves whiter and whiter and whiter, with a more and more healthy looking and brilliant looking skin. But what is inside ourselves, in our soul, in our mind, that's a different story. That's more difficult to clean. I'm not saying that these people are necessarily without Jungian shadows. No. But at least here there is social life on this poor road, you know, that I don't know, that there is interaction. People talk. Lady here washes some clothes. You can imagine they don't have water. They bring the water who knows from where. Um, they live. And so do the people here in this African place. A lot of recipients, again, for water. But Kenneth Frampton wrote to me about 2 years ago when he said the future will belong to rain harvesting. Well, that's exactly what these people do here. Rain harvesting. Where do they get the water from? It looks like a world in turmoil in a way, a world after some disaster, natural or otherwise. But I actually even see hope here. I used to exasperate some people in the United States when I used to tell them poverty will save you. Now, let's not be misunderstood. There is a lot of poverty in the United States, but the consciousness of poverty is, in my opinion, different there than in some other countries, and it manifests itself differently. You see here, you see the city of the future, or the city of modernity, or the city of progress behind, and in the foreground we see these dwellings, Now, isn't it strange, but there is more color in these poor dwellings at the bottom than there is in the great towers of power behind? That's what I try to say, that somehow there are signs of life more in these slums than in our proud towers. Yes, look, there is a lot of possible despair here. There is a lot of garbage. Garbage is a big problem, and this child is stepping on the garbage. But the garbage comes from where? It comes from the processes of life, but it also comes from the excessive consumerism, which finds its place even within the slums. Doesn't matter how poor these people are. On the other hand, you look at that child and you wonder, what will be the future of this child? He is looking at the world through that open door, and what does he see? We very often forget that so many people on this earth live in very difficult conditions. And I think we shouldn't forget. Again, we see the importance of water, for these people, and not just for these people, water is crucial. And when we think of the so-called civilized world, which consumes so much water, which actually, squanders so much water, I do it myself. Even if I'm aware of it, it's almost unavoidable. We use too much water, while in other parts of the world, with an ample population, water is crucial and it's very difficult to arrive at. Life is difficult. Yes, it is difficult. But you see these recipients which long for water to come either from the sky in the form of rain, or I don't know where it comes from. It's clear that water is indispensable. Otherwise, the worlds of living are as they are, temporary, ephemeral, weak. The slums of today's world, some of them. 1 billion people apparently live in such slums all over the world. Why Mumbai has slums? Mumbai, you know, the most important city, I mean, the largest city in India, if I'm not mistaken. Why does it have slums? And look at this. At the bottom, the slums. At the top, a city which could have been anywhere on this earth. In Europe, in North America, in Canada, in South America, it could have been anywhere. It's in India. And look what a difference between the slums and what is behind. Human beings in both cases, but living so very differently. The density at the bottom is astonishing. And yes, the absence of nature. The absence, we only see one tree there on the left, while at the top we see large spaces, a lot of trees, and so on. The same city, similar human beings, and yet two very different ways of living and two very different architectures. Some might say what is at the bottom is not an architecture. I'm not so sure about this. It's a different kind of architecture. It's more organic in a way, more spontaneous. Is more so-called imperfect, welcoming, quick adjustments or changes. It's not planned, it's unplanned. And this I would like to oppose to Villa Savoie by Le Corbusier. Let's call it Villa Miseria. Although you see in the back, you see the great containers which go all over the world from one continent to another, from one country to another with so-called goods, goods, goods and goods again. Most of them actually totally unnecessary and certainly not vital for life. So in today's world, we have this kind of improvised construction, and then in the back, not far away, something that totally ignores what we look at in the foreground. Very interesting picture, in my opinion. Because in the back, we have the so-called progress, and in the front, we have the painful reality of life as lived by those of lesser means. What is also in a way important and almost amazing is how important every square inch or every square centimeter is for these people. They don't have the means to squander space. I remember the humorous statement of Philip Johnson, who said architecture is the art of losing space. Well, here we don't have a lot of lost space because they cannot afford it. But somehow I have the feeling that these people are more together than we are in the so-called developed or more developed part of the world. Their community is stronger. They live together. So I found, and with this I end this imperfect presentation about the complex subject, the slums. I found an article, Slums Can Inspire the Future of Cities. Here is why. And this was the blog where I discovered it. Slums can inspire the future of cities. Here is why. And the person who wrote the text I'm going to read in the following instances is this Stephanie Ossenbach. And she contemplated the reality of slums and arrived at some surprising conclusions, and I will read them immediately. Around 1 billion people worldwide live in slums, informal settlements typically populated by the urban poor. These residents represent a third of the global urban population and drive over 90% of its growth. By 2030, so 7 years from now, there will be 2 billion slum dwellers residing primarily in Asian and African countries. According to UN Habitat, a slum lacks one or more of the following. One, durable housing of a permanent nature that protects against extreme climate conditions. Two, sufficient living space, which means not more than 3 people sharing the same room. So they miss these things. Three, easy access to safe water in sufficient amounts at an affordable price. Four, access to adequate sanitation in the form of a private or public toilet shared by a reasonable number of people. And five, security of tenure that prevents forced evictions. However, despite harsh conditions and scarce resources, over the last decades, many urbanists and economists believe the future of cities depends on the future of slums. Entrepreneurship and resourcefulness. So this researcher, she found certain attributes or qualities of the slums dwellers. And she begins by mentioning entrepreneurship and resourcefulness. So slum dwellers are often experts,
You muted the microphone.
Okay, I am sorry, something happened to the microphone. Thank you for letting me know. So these two researchers, Nobel Prize winning economists, were studying a slum dwelling in India, and that's what they wrote about inside the house. We found one inside her house filling her daughter's plate with lunch that she had cooked while making the dosas. She told us that later that day she was going out to vend her saris, the long piece of decorative cloth that Indian women drape around themselves. She gets plain nylon saris from the shop and stitches beads and small shiny pieces of them on them. And once a week she takes them from house to house, hoping that women would buy them to wear on special occasions. And they do buy them, she said confidently. All the other dosa women we met that day had a similar story. Once they are done frying dosas, they do something else. Some collect trash, others make pickles to sell, others work as laborers. When slum dwellers as such get the right access and support, the economic activities tend to holistically benefit the entire community. So this was the point about entrepreneurship. The slum dwellers do seem to be quite inventive in the field of entrepreneurship, and they do wonders with the smallest things. Something the so-called developed societies don't do so easily. So entrepreneurship and resourcefulness with the simplest means, because poverty forces them to be inventive. Then adaptability and innovation, also the slum dwellers. During the missions of making the most of their resources, slum dwellers often innovate and exhibit a high level of adaptability to new solutions and technologies. While changing processes can take a long time for municipalities or companies, slums can immediately take to solutions that deliver results. For instance, even though millions living in slums still don't have access to clean energy, from Brazil to India, solar solutions are rapidly lighting up lives. When slum dwellers can ditch harmful and expensive energy resources like paraffin or kerosene, they do not only have healthier homes, but also can save money. Asha, who resides in Korogocho, the fourth largest slum in the capital, Kenyan capital, Nairobi, in Africa, of course, recently switched to a low-tech and inexpensive solar solution offered by a social business. Slums, laboratories for the sustainable city. Despite the stigma about the very word slum, these informal settlements around the world are evolving micro cities that are essential for the urban future. Some researchers even consider slums as labs for the sustainable city. The formal city couldn't survive without the informal city being the slum city, says Alfredo Brillenburg, an architect who has been studying and practicing in slums for decades. He adds, a slum lets you learn a hell of a lot about society, about living, about aspirations, and about the economy of resources, reuse, and adaptation. It offers incredible lessons for the rest of the world. End of quotation. Thus, understanding and improving slums can lift millions out of poverty and lay the foundation for smarter and fairer cities for all. Thank you.